Welcome back in, everybody, to the JAKIB post-game show, Week 3 edition, coming off a big win for the Philadelphia Eagles, 15-12. Big Sills, not the score I was expecting coming out of this football game. I want to go to Jalen Hurts. Johnny Mack will be with us in a second. He's working on his internet connection, something going wrong on that end. So we'll get him back in a second. But Big Sills, I'm going to our man, Jalen Hurts. Look, we talked about him all week long. I was critical of him all week long. You got to rise up. You got to be better. You got to make up for the loss of A.J. Brown. Well, he goes out there and gets a win today with no A.J. He loses Devontae. He loses two of his starting offensive linemen. Now, granted, he got help from Dallas Goedert and he got help from Saquon Barkley, but find me a quarterback in the league that doesn't get any help. Jalen Hurts today, I thought after those two turnovers, you take away those two plays, those two turnover plays, I thought he was terrific today. I'll give you a stat line real quick as well. He was 29 of 38 for 311. He had 0 touchdowns through the air and an interception. But overall, look, I thought he went out there and I thought he delivered the goods in the second half of that game. Big Sills, your thoughts on Jalen Hurts' play today? And here's Johnny Mack. We'll get him back up.
There were times in the ball game that you looked at Hurts' performance, and I thought that he played well in moments. But once again, he's not been consistent. There wasn't consistent football being played in that game. Now, again, you got to take into consideration this as well. Dennis Allen used to annihilate Tom Brady. Okay? I can't tell you, Tom Brady said one of the absolute worst coordinators to go against for him. I think he even had a losing record in Tampa versus Dennis Allen's defenses, even when they had Sean Payton as the head coach there. He would hold the same kind of stuff and Brady and his points down because that's just what that defense with that talent has. John pointed out a bunch of the players that they have at all levels. Wasn't like the Saints didn't play well. The Saints played well too, but here was the difference in the ball game. The offensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles beat the line for the Saints, in my opinion. They rarely got to him. There was just some indecision-making and the rolling and the footwork, what have you, of Hurts. But I agree with you, Zander. You lose 2 O-linemen. You have none of your top-flight wide receivers in the ball game. And you come out with the victory. You find Goddard. You give it for him. You give it to him to make him make a play, and he did. By the way, Goddard made plays the entire afternoon. That's the job of a quarterback. It's the same thing that's being asked of Brock Purdy in San Francisco. Dude, I'm not looking for you to make the sensational play when you have sensational players that are on your field. In my opinion, today, Jalen Hurts made players around him better. And when you see how Goddard hadn't been involved probably since when? A year ago? I mean, then you look at Barkley's importance. There's no question. Saquon Barkley is the fuel that's fueling that engine right now and keeping that football team as consistent as it can be, because without him controlling the clock, they got problems because of injuries in the wide receiving core, the inconsistency of the quarterback. I still think he's coming along in that Kellen Moore offense. He still does a lot of things tendency-wise. I mean, the rolling right thing, they've got to stop that, man. When you watched Aaron Rodgers the other night, he was so unpredictable in what he was doing, rolling right or left. You can't keep that up. And, he stayed in the pocket a little more because I think he may have heard some of the comments that people were saying, or maybe he even looked at the film and said, I got to stay in the pocket. He stayed in the pocket. He held the ball too long. Why? He had lesser talent running routes. No disrespect to Jahan Dotson and whomever, Britton Covey. That's not A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith running routes. Okay,
yeah, so I don't think that's disrespectful.
More opportunity for those guys to have to mature. I think Jalen held on to the ball because he was trying to get these guys open. So, if you look at the one play down the sideline, you look at the rest of the play, no touchdowns and the turnovers continue, fumble and an INT. You still look at it and you go like this, a lot of room for improvement with him. But again, end of the day, he does the one thing John says. Hey, man, in a 12-round fight, and it's in a championship fight, Jalen's at his best in championship rounds, 11 and 12.
Yeah. And I rebooted, so hopefully I'm better. But I talk about it all the time. He's relentless. He's a 60-minute player. And even if you hold him down, he's got this almost cornerback like mentality to forget the bad stuff and keep pushing, keep pushing. You mentioned Dennis Allen. He's a very good defensive coordinator, defensive minded head coach. Now, Joe Woods, a very good coordinator in New Orleans. Look, sometimes I wish, football coaches could be like basketball coaches. And I would have called timeout and said, look, guys, Devontae Smith's not on the field. A.J. Brown's not on the field. All you got to worry about is Dallas Goedert. Even Britton Covey wasn't on the field. Yeah. You're talking about Paris Campbell, Jahan Dotson, who doesn't even know what he's doing, and Johnny Wilson. I would have said, boxing one, Dallas Goedert.
I know, especially in that last play, John, where Saquon was really not a factor because they needed to get the ball down the field quick.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you can't do that in football. And look, Marcus Lattimore was one of those players. I don't know who was the other player, but Marcus Lattimore was one of the two that ran into each other that enabled Dallas to go for that 61-yard gain. And at some point, same thing I said about Nick Sirianni applies to Dennis Allen. What are you going to trust Marcus Lattimore in that situation? You should. He made a mistake, So I look at Jalen Hurts in that interception. Guess what? That's on Devontae Smith. As great as a route runner Devontae Smith is, and he's one of the best in the NFL, that's a poor route. He left his quarterback hanging out to dry.
John, do you think that's what Nick said to Jalen when he came over to the sideline and he was talking to him that, hey, that INT wasn't on you, that was on the route? Could he have said something like that to him?
I mean, I'm sure the people upstairs, hard to see from the field, as you know, but I'm sure the people upstairs let him know. Yeah, that one was on Devontae. Or maybe you want to blame, because that's an AJ route. That's a big-bodied trust route in the middle of the field where you're good. You got to make sure you come across the defensive back space and almost play power forward. A, he's not the type of player to do that, Devontae Smith. But B, you expect him to at least run the right routes, and he didn't even do that. So you got to get way down to blame Devontae, number one, then blame Kellen Moore, and then blame Jalen Hurts if you want to. But I always say with turnovers, you got to look at them each individually. Now, the fumble, that's on Jalen Hurts all day.
Yeah.
You got to protect the ball better than that.
Yeah, he was careless.
Yeah, very careless. So, but overall, 29 of 38 with all this attrition that we mentioned, losing. You don't have AJ. You lose Covey early. You lose Devontae late. You lose your right guard. You lose your right tackle. That's a pretty good football game for Jalen Hurts. And are the points where you want them to be? No. But 460 yards against that particular team,
good.
That's pretty good. Now,
absolutely.
126 of them came on two plays. Saquon's home run and Dallas's 61-yard gain, but they count, and they put points on the board, both those plays. And essentially, that's what they needed. But I thought, considering the circumstances, I thought Jalen Hurts played very well, actually.
I agree.
How about this, Zander, before you answer here? That was a hard-hitting ball game.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, let me tell you something. The wood was out on both sides of the football in that game.
Yeah, which is why, you were hard on Jalen Carter Sills at the end, and I get it. He's got to clean that up. But the emotions were running
high.
That
was the frustration of him not playing well last week and all that. But I'll tell you what. You want to know what a football game used to look like back in the day, them low-scoring, high-hitting games, high-volume hits? There were hits. I mean, that hit that Devontae took across the middle, that's as big as hit you'll see on a wide receiver with no flag. I could have.
That's because he was coming back to the play.
Hey John, I thought they could have called targeting on that thing because I thought he hit him in the head with his helmet because it knocked his helmet off.
Now they showed the replay. He got him in the back, but he hit him so hard his helmet popped off.
Unreal, man. That was some big hits.
And then it looked like somebody and another guy came on top of him. I don't, John. I kind of try and join you with not being critical of the refs, but I thought that play could have been blown dead, and it might have avoided some of that extra hitting. That Smitty took.
Yeah, but
Mike
also, yeah, that's very loud environment as well. Now the penning play, that was a dirty play, and we'll see
he'll be fine for that.
What's going on with Darius Slay. Hopefully it's not serious. Looked
I
like
thought
he
that play
tweaked
was
his
ridiculous.
knee.
Trevor
Yeah.
Penning just driving him. He's like
Hey,
driving
Zander,
him.
you want to hear something that John McMullen will know but doesn't want to say? You're telling me I got rid of Slay on a 15-yarder, and then I go back to him the next time? I got to tell you.
They went right after Kaylee Ringo.
Hey,
right after.
Remember, Greg Williams used to coach in that building.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
oh, yeah.
So I'll just say this to you here. If you came to me and said I took Slay out and I took a 15-yarder, did that help me try to win my ball game? I'd be like this. Now, hey, I'm sorry.
Hey,
players hurt.
The New Orleans Saints.
Now, look, that's
the
brutal truth, though, Sills.
Yeah, Sean Payton had to give up a year of coaching Greg Williams,
Suspended.
and they won a Super Bowl though.
They sure did.
Would you trade for that? I don't know. I would.
I want.
I'll get in trouble for that, but
I want the Super Bowl win. But again, nobody's trying to hurt anybody, Zander. But what you are doing is this. This is like John says. You know, you can't say it's the war of attrition, and when the war of attrition hits, not every play's fair in the war of attrition.
No.
Some are going to be not fair. Some are. Aaron Rodgers' play when he got hurt last year was not a fair war of attrition injury. It happens.
Yeah,
no doubt.
I mean, I saw Sam Darnold went down at one point, and everybody was like, "Woof," because they won again, and Sam's playing great, and you say, "Wow, bang, he's gone." But then he was able to come back. This is Dan knows. Dan could speak about this better than me. This is a brutal sport. As much as they try to legislate it out of the game,
never happened.
It is brutal. And that's the thing when you get late in the season, the guys playing aren't 100%, and everybody thinks they're on the field, so they're okay. I always use the Nate Gary example. Eagles fans hated Nate Gary, and the coaches, Jim Schwartz, Ken Plajoel, loved him. And what people didn't understand, they loved him because they needed him, and he played an entire season through a sports hernia because they needed him. So they loved him for doing that. But he didn't play very well, mainly because he was playing through a sports hernia. But, that's what a lot of NFL players do. They play through a lot of stuff. And a lot of it we never know about. The quarterback show on Netflix, I don't know if you guys saw it. People should watch that. What Kirk Cousins would go through to play every week was shown closely in that show, and he never appeared on the injury report. He was like half dead. They never put him on the injury report.
Yeah, no doubt.
Probably what Hurts went through a year ago.
Yeah, football is a tough sport without a doubt. So I do want to move back into the defense a little bit, guys. I mean, look, coming off of last week, it was obvious what the biggest, problem with this team was when you talk about that run defense, when you talk about really just the defense as a whole, not getting after the quarterback, not being able to stop the run, not being able to set the edge. I thought they responded today beautifully. The defense looked like a different defense. It looked like a new team out there on the defensive side of the ball. Sills, I'll start with you. Just your take on how they responded today, coming off really a tough Monday night game, a short week, a brutal loss on Monday night just 6 days ago, and the run defense responds today in a big way.
Look, man, you could talk technique till you're blue in the face. You could talk scheme till you're blue in the face. Playing defense is an attitude. It's not a position. It's an attitude. And I was so impressed with the attitude. Hey, screw technique, one technique, doing the right things, following your reads, not watching the ball. Dude, it's one thing to sit there on a chalkboard. It's another thing to go in and apply attitude. And they had a nasty attitude. That's the best attitude I've seen in 3.5 months of Philadelphia Eagle defensive football. Was right there. They played with an attitude, and it started with the two young bucks in the middle. I think Jordan Davis had a hell of a football game himself.
Yeah, he looked good.
I mean, Seth Joyner said that last week on WIP. He was talking about him being a waste of a pick. And he showed, get this, These guys are hearing that. Okay, Jalen Carter, John said, he's sitting there. Finally, they had to make him roll up there and answer some questions, playing like trash. Dude, no, 13th pick and 9th pick, they don't want to answer to that kind of stuff. They went out there and played, did a better job at setting the edge. You know why? Because Brandon Graham had more snaps than Bryce Huff. What John said, if this game does not hammer down to Vic Fangio and to Nick Sirianni and the rest of the staff, your $51 million guy should not be starting ahead of Brandon Graham. Because when Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat were out there, the edges were more secure. You saw it. It was night and day when those two guys were in tandem out there. And it improved the linebacker play when they were setting the edge because the guys were scraping down their normal lanes. What did you see, too, also? Those linebackers, John pointed out, Zach Bond back up again. Why? Because the defensive tackles weren't getting blown off the ball into the back scrape lane, and those guys were getting washed down from Bryce Huff. They played with attitude in that football game, and I think they took it to them. If you really want to look at it, the Philadelphia Eagles may not have dominated them on the scoreboard, but I thought they dominated them for just about 50 of that 60 minutes of that football game.
Yeah. Gave up 89 yards on the ground. Coming in,
dominating
150, whatever it was. You know, one of the things I think we all looked at it coming in saying, oh boy, here comes the Shanahan offense and the play action and the stretch play. I think in some ways that helped the Eagles because they could play their 5-man fronts more. And they are way better defending the run when they use those 5-man fronts. So you had a lot of Jordan Davis on the nose, Jalen Carter, whether it was Milton Williams, then you had Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, as you mentioned, on the edge. Tough to run, tough sledding for Alvin Kamara. You know, this is a game where maybe Clint Kubiak should have said, you know what, it's not working. Let me get an extra receiver on the field, try to get the Eagles into those 4-man fronts before it's 3rd and long and see if I can run the ball that way. But he didn't do it. And I think it really helped. Didn't do it often enough. I think it really helped the Eagles. They're not bad defending the run when that 5-man front's on the field. They've been bad defending the run when they're using their 40 fronts. And I don't know if we learned that they're better at that today. And maybe we'll get a better indication of that next week against Tampa Bay.
Hey, no doubt. Zander, remember we said somebody asked a question in the chat and the guy goes like this, 6 seals, how do you fix it? Well, you get mismatch. And like John just said, the 5-man was the difference in that ball game because New Orleans didn't have matchups that favored them in that run game. And they outnumbered them. And they had better play from their backers and filling the gaps and setting the edge. And I thought, again, that was the difference in the ball game there, too. That 5-man front, it outnumbered what they were going to do. So at the end of the day, you go back to what and how John started this whole thing. Vic went back, and he really did scheme this thing up and said, let's go to a 5-man. And they did, and it really took away. Their attitude was this, Zander, let's take Kamara away. You take Kamara away, Carr's not beating us. And I think that's what those guys were thinking because that's kind of how it played out.
Yeah, but in a lot of ways, as a defensive player or defensive coach, you're at the mercy of the offense, right? If they're going to put 4 receivers out there, you can't play a 5-man front
or 2 tight end. You're right, you can't.
So the fact that New Orleans plays the way that they play, in hindsight, really helped the Eagles out because they could keep those 5-man fronts on the field more than they typically can, which helped them with the running game and then put the football in Derek Carr's hands, and Derek Carr's not going to beat you. And he didn't beat you. And I think that's kind of the way it worked during the game, and it worked out well. And I think if Clint Kubiak would have figured that out, I think maybe we're having a different discussion. But good for the Eagles. And by the way, the Eric McCoy injury, I mean, he was playing off the charts in the first 2 games of the season. The Saints center, and
Huge
boy,
loss.
they couldn't. They were just not the same team without him. But that happens. The Eagles lost 2 offensive linemen, one of the best in football, Lane Johnson, and Tyler Steen and Fred Johnson persevered. So I was talking about persevering without A.J. Brown. The Eagles were finally able to do it. They didn't score a lot of points. They never do when A.J.'s not on the field, but they were able to persevere, find a way to win the game with all these injuries. New Orleans was crippled by that one injury, and that's not going to serve well if that guy's not going to be out there. I don't know how difficult the injury is, but they ruled him out very early in the game. So that could affect their whole season if they don't do a better job figuring it out.
No doubt. Just your thoughts on the linebacker today. John, I'll start with you on this one. I thought Zach Baun returned to form today. He looked tremendous out there, flying all over the field. I'm not sure what his final stats were in the game.
13 tackles.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's been, he's a great first game, really bad second game. And now he's back playing. I think, this was obviously he came from New Orleans, never got a tremendous chance to play down there a lot. So a lot to play for. I think he wanted to prove some things. So that factors in. I thought Nakobe had his best game of the season. He did get caught on that one play, looking lost in coverage, but that's Chris Olave. Like, that's the scheme. You got Nakobe Dean matched up on Chris Olave. Back to the drawing board, Vic. I mean, that shouldn't happen. So I don't know what people expect on that. He had a tackle for loss. They got to be more consistent, those 2 guys. But I think you see the upside that was certainly better than the linebacker group last year. There's a chance that gets better as the season goes on, I think. Nakobe Dean and Zach Baun. And I think we can close the book on Devin White. Ain't happening, people. Sorry.
No, I think what Baun did today, like John said, you're going to start seeing Trotter get more work in practice. Okay.
Yeah, I think Trotter might be ahead of him. And Oren Burks can play. He's played in the league, and Ben Van Sumren's sort of one of those guys nobody thinks about. But yeah, they're better equipped at linebacker pretty significantly than they were last season. That's a positive, I think, because the Eagles, let's be honest, they don't place a lot of assets, so it's about as good as you can expect with the kind of assets they put into the position.
John, I think one of the things that has to help the confidence of the players, especially on defense, is the amount of growth you had from the Atlanta game through the Saints game. Because as a player, that's momentum. He wanted this and it worked versus this not working. Last year when you had that momentum go the other way, when you had Matt Patricia in there, it became a avalanche of poor play from pretty much everybody on that side of the ball. When you start to see things working and you start to buy confidence and you're starting to buy in to what they're doing like that, the amount of growth that they had from the Atlanta game to through, like I just said, the Saints game, that's going to carry a long way into the Buck game because, you get confidence with what you're doing. And if there's success with it, you're going to continue doing that. That's how you build, like you said. Hey, Saquon Barkley makes that play on 3rd and 3 all the time. Well, guess what? We'll see if he can end up doing that play consistently and he can make that play. But when I watch what those guys did, especially up front, those 2 defensive tackles getting interior pressure like that, and Vic put him in a 5 front, hey, man, he put me in a better position to succeed. That's confidence, too, also that your coaches, what they think and what they're doing is going to impact you and putting you in a position to succeed.
Can we give Reed Blankenship some love as well?
He played well today. Man, he did.
That dude, he is
another guy, John, that didn't play well last week, played well this week.
I don't think he played poorly. I'll say this: he's been the most consistent Eagles defender this season through 3 games, and number 2 ain't close. Because you've had some pretty big ups and downs with Zach Bond. From game to game to game, Reed Blankenship has been by far the most consistent Eagles defender. And man, that's another interception. That is tough to keep that ball off the turf, making that dive. And it was really close, and he got his hands under it, and they're looking at it, and they're looking for just that little glimpse of the nose of the football hitting the turf. He did the same thing in Brazil. Pretty good player, and nobody in Zander knows. Nobody in Philadelphia seems to know it. I don't know. Pretty good player that people need.
He can play, John. You're right.
Yeah. They always draft. Well, he was undrafted. I don't give a shit. The NFL missed because he can play.
John, people don't get this, that half the league and half the rosters are undrafted players. So, I mean, just because you don't find a guy, look at TJ Edwards. He's one of the top 3 linebackers in pro football, and he was an undrafted guy.
Well, they don't know that either, Sills. They don't know that either.
Right? I mean, right? You mean some of the people, the great James Harrison from the Steelers, that guy was cut 3 times, played in the World League, Arena League, and now he's going to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I covered John Randall, who's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he didn't get drafted when the draft was 12 rounds, and he's already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Texas A&I guy.
Yeah,
not A&M. Texas A&I guy.
Texas A&I. And by the way, coming into this week, I know Prince. If Prince is out there, PFF top safety in the NFL, Julian Love. You want to guess who number 2 was in the entire National Football League?
The milkman, Johnny Mac.
Yeah,
good stuff there. John, I'm going to let you go, but I got one question left for each of you guys to answer. John, Sills and I will come back. We'll hit on everybody's super chats, and we'll engage with the chat a little bit coming out of the break. We're going to let Johnny Mac drop out of here. John, I'll start with you on this one. Saquon Barkley, man. I mean, he is a game changer. 65 yards. He takes it to the house. He just flipped that game on its head there was a point in this game the Eagles had 25 plays inside the Saints territory and had 0 points on the board until Saquon Barkley rushes it 65 yards to the house. What a game changer he has been for this team. Your thoughts on his game?
Home run hitter, man. Home run hitter. And like I said, he might go 0 for 3. And then all of a sudden, it's a big spot in the game, and he hits a 3-run home run. That's what happened today. 65-yard touchdown. And also give flowers on that play. Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson, they did a tremendous job. But he got to the second level, and he was gone. And that's something the Eagles haven't really had to the point. Miles had it a little bit, but he didn't have the power to get to the second level nearly as much. And when Saquon can turn it on, it's pretty impressive.
He's a better vision. He's a better vision runner, John.
Yeah,
than any of the 2 that's been back
better. The passing game I thought was overrated. Again, he's had the drop 4 catches today for 9 yards. That's coming. That part of it's overrated. But him in the running game is where he makes the difference. And you saw a big pass protection rep as well. He's a good pass protector, which is sort of a lost art amongst running backs in the NFL. So that's big. If he can deliver that big home run each and every week, I always talked about Saquon. It's not about the numbers, it's about the impact. And you saw it in week 1, impact. You saw it in week 3, impact. You saw it in week 2, bad impact. But when he makes that impact play in a positive fashion, it generally means very good things.
No doubt. Sills, your thoughts on Saquon Barkley today?
As advertised, I thought his best years were behind him. Now, the question is going to be this. This is the pessimist in me here. Lot of workload. Ton of
Yeah.
workload for a player with a ton of
You're
miles.
not wrong about that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this guy had 900 carries at Penn State. This guy's had one of the higher volume. And last 4 years, he's had 2 substantial knee injuries. How many carries did he have today in the ball game?
Only 17. They were actually down.
Oh,
17
good.
plus
Good.
four touches in the passing game. So 21.
So am I right, John, when I say this? 24, 20, 22, 21, and now 17. That's great, because here's what I want to see him do. His yards per carry is going to be the impact that he has on that, because when you get a 69-yarder like that and you only have those amount of carries,
Yeah,
you're
it was
talking about a guy like 7-8 yards a carry.
8.6.
8 yards a carry. I don't need anything else. I've got the game in the bag. Here's the game, really. Look at this. Barkley had 8 yards a carry. And what did the Eagle defense give up in yards per carry in this ball game? Right there. Those were the 2 things that were crippling the football team really in the first 2 games and making those games close. Again, the lack of points is something still to go over here a little bit. And maybe that's just going through the progressions of the Kellen Moore offense here a little bit. But, like I said, if you didn't look at the scoreboard and you just used your eyeball test and you looked at Barkley and the way they ran the ball, it looked like 22, and they dominated that football game. I mean, they didn't dominate it on the scoreboard, and that's the troubling thing about it, because it keeps it a one-score game and a fourth quarter game. The Eagles don't want fourth quarter. No team wants fourth quarter games, especially a team like the Saints. But the Saints weren't scoring. But when they got that thing into the fourth quarter, I went like this. This favors Philly, because Philly has all those injuries at the wide receiver position. Low scoring, I thought, favored Philly.
Yep, no doubt in that. And ultimately, it ended up favoring them. They got the win. Johnny Mac, your final thought there?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's about, since day one, it's about impact with Saquon. He certainly provided that. But to me, this is the Dallas Goedert game for a number of reasons. One, it looked like all hope was lost at the end of the game. You got you're backed up. You got a long situation behind the sticks. No AJ Brown, no Devontae Smith, no even Britton Covey. And as I mentioned, you're down to Jahan Dotson, who doesn't look good early in his Eagles career. Paris Campbell, practice squad guy, being elevated. Rookie Johnny Wilson, who made a nice play, but let's be honest, you're not going to go to Johnny Wilson in a big spot. They had nothing. Jalen Hurts had nothing except Dallas Goedert, and he's able to make that play. But it wasn't just that. 11 targets, 10 receptions, 170 yards for a tight end. When is the last time a tight end had 170? I have to look that up.
No doubt.
Certainly an Eagles tight end.
That's Gronk.
That's his career. That's a career game for him, too.
Yeah. That's like Gronk and Kelsey type numbers.
Yeah. Wow. And we've been waiting for it to the point, and I get it. And Zander mentioned, starting to say it's a little bit disappointing with Dallas Goedert. But I always said, man, the guy's talented. Man, the guy's talented. Man, the guy's talented. You got to see his talent today. There aren't a lot of tight ends that can do what he did today in the NFL.
He is he's a kind of an athletic freak for his size. And you saw it today, as you pointed out, which he was really good today. And Carver in the chat points out, Kellen Moore deserves some credit too. That was a perfectly called rub route that he had him on. Well,
I think that was more. Because I looked at it, I rewound it because I thought, well, boy, I want to give credit to the guy who ran the rub route, and it was Jahan Dotson, and it was okay, but it's just Marcus Lattimore and I don't know who the second Saint. They just ran into each other.
Yeah,
but
was it Honey Badger?
I was
don't think it was.
I was just surprised because coming into it, I'm like, it's got to be Dallas. Got it. You don't have AJ, you don't have Devontae, and you really don't have Saquon, because you got to go 70 yards in a minute and a half. So you're not going to run the football. Like, I'm thinking, if I'm Saints, I'm taking out Dallas Goedert and making him beat me with Jahan Dotson. And then there goes Dallas Goedert, 60 yards up the sideline.
Yeah, but and it's about, and you got a bit of a break because they ran into each other. But even when you get that break, when he turns the football up the field, you think, all right, somebody will recover. A normal tight end maybe it's a 20, 25-yard gain, and you're like, oh, we got to really settle down. He turned that into 61. Yeah, that's pretty impressive for a tight end in this league.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Johnny Mac, we're going to talk to you tomorrow morning on Birds 365 from 8 to 10 a.m. Before we get to our break, just any final thoughts here on the post-game show for you before you drop off here on this game? 15-12, the Eagles win, move to 2-1 on the
persevering. They didn't do it last week. They got to get AJ back. I mean, this offense is not going to be the same. As much as, it's impressive. They put up 460 yards. We mentioned two guys, really, Saquon and Dallas.
John, what's your gut feeling on AJ against the Bucs? You think?
Well, it's going to be a couple weeks, is what he told Lisa Salters. So next week is starting to get closer, and you would think they have the bye week after Tampa, so they might play it cautious. But if they do decide to play it cautious, expect another ugly offensive game. If he's healthy, I don't care about the bye week. I got to get him on the field because he's the key to this offense.
No doubt. Johnny Mac, thank you, man. We're going to take a commercial break. Dan Cilio and I will be back. We'll kick it around with the super chats and the chats for a couple minutes. And then coming up later on after that, the post-game show, I'll let Johnny or Big Sills drop off, and I'll talk to some members of the chat if they want to join me on the show as well. Johnny Mac, great stuff, man. Let's get to our commercial break.
John.
The JAKIB post-game
show.
Thanks, guys.
In
3 minutes. Back after this.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFC selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.